Hi everyone, my name is Kennedy Larkin, and the math manipulative that I have chosen for my project is a fraction circle. So this is what it looks like. It comes in this clear case, and it is a bunch of circles that are broken into different fraction sizes. So the standard that I have chosen to go along with my manipulative is 3 and R4 represent fractions with denominators of 2, 3, 4, and 6, and 8 in multiple ways within a framework using visual models. And this is a 3rd grade math standard. So this tool can be used directly for this standard because it includes all of the denominators, including the ones listed in the standard. So as stated in the beginning of the video, it is a manipulative that has different fraction sizes. They're all circles, but each circle is broken into a different denominator, and so it gives students the opportunities to work with different fraction sizes. Each circle is a visual representation of a different fraction size or a different denominator. It is also important to note that the standard that I chose is limited to fractions with the denominators of 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8. So the manipulative does give students the opportunity to work with fractions with the denominators up to 12, but strictly going by the standard, students should work with denominators of 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8. Even though there are more sizes available for students to work with when it comes to the fraction circle. So when it comes down to the standard, 3 and R4 represent fractions with denominators of 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8 in multiple ways within a framework using visual models. A strategy is that students should be given the opportunity to explore this concept and this standard using a variety of visual tools such as Cuisenaire rods, fraction tiles, fraction strips, fraction bars, fraction towers, number lines, analog clock, fraction circle, etc. So this strategy is directly pulled from the Georgia Standards of Excellence, which makes the fraction circle an amazing tool to use to go along with this standard, because it directly aligns with it being a visual model for students to be able to use. So fractions do make a very, very useful concept for students, and they do play a crucial role in our everyday life outside of the classroom. Mastering fractions helps students develop essential problem-solving skills. It prepares them for advanced math and enables them to apply mathematical concepts in real-world situations. They can be beneficial because understanding fractions strengthens logical reasoning and critical thinking. And when students work with fractions, they must compare, simplify, and manipulate numbers in various ways. And they will get the opportunity to do that when working with this type of manipulative. And all of these things enhance their problem-solving abilities ultimately at the end of the day. Fractions are also a stepping stone for greater concepts when it comes to mathematics in the classroom as well. For example, fractions can be very useful in understanding decimals. It's very useful, for example, for students to know that 0.5 equals 1/2 when we're speaking in decimals and fraction terms. They're also good when it comes to comparing ratios and proportions. Many real-world applications, including map reading and recipe adjustments, depend on proportional reasonings, and ultimately these ratios and proportional reasonings can be put into fraction forms, which will be useful for students to know as well. We can also find a lot of real-world application when it comes to fractions, for example, in cooking and in baking. When baking and cooking, measurements are in fractions form. For example, a recipe for brownies may call for 1/4 cup of water or 1/2 cup of oil. Also, even in shopping, students can make the comparison between percentages and fractions. So for example, if something may be 25% off, well, we know that 25 out of 100 is 1/4, and students can make that kind of connection as well. And we can also find fractions in these connections in measurements. For example, a measurement may be 3/8 of an inch or 5 1/2 feet. So we can find these fractions and the application of fractions in our day-to-day and our real world. So to speak more about the tool itself, so fraction circles is a manipulative used to teach students how to compare and construct fractions. So with the fraction circle having so many different sizes, students are able to compare and contrast the sizes and fractions and how they relate or differ from each other. So a few ways to use the fraction circle is students can drag the colored pieces onto circles to represent fractions. They can compare sizes and see how many of one fraction fits into another fraction, to talk about equivalent fractions, and they can physically demonstrate the addition and subtraction of fractions using the fraction circle. So the fraction circle itself will look like this. It is 9 fractions that will come in a plastic container, all different sizes. So we have whole, halves, twelfths, fifths, we have tenths, thirds, fourths, sixths, and this over here is eighths. And it's kind of out of the frame some. So for example, an example way to use this in the classroom with students, you could use fractions, like I said, with the denominators of 2, 3, 4, 6, or 8, because that is what our standard states. But an example problem for students to be able to work with and manipulate this is having students display 2 different ways to make 1/2 using the denominators 2, 3, 4, 6, or 8. So for example, like I said, students are limited to the denominators 2, 3, 4, 6, or 8. And I want students to show me 1/2 in 2 different ways using any of those different denominators. So we are going to work with our fourths today and our halves for this example. So I want students to show me 2 different ways to show 1/2. Well, I could, of course, work with the halves itself and just have 1/2, but I also want students to show me that using the fourths. And so to show me that, students would show 2 out of the 4, and students can make this comparison. And when asking students to tell me about this comparison, they could tell me, well, 2/4 is the same as 1/2 because this makes one whole. It makes one complete circle. However, the denominators are different. We have 1/2 piece and then we have 2/4, but they are both equal because they make one whole. So that is one way students can manipulate and comparing the same sizes of fractions using different denominators. All right, so we could do a different example. Another example that you can have students do in the classroom is you can have students model a fraction for you that you want them to be able to see and do on their own, just to see where their thought process is and where they are in comparing fractions. So for example, I could tell students to model 4, 6 on their fraction circle. So, like I said, it is one of the denominators that are limited to the standard. And I want students to show me 4, 6. So, they should obviously be using the 6th fraction circle. And I want students to model 4, 6. So, what students will show me should be 4 out of the 6 pieces. They have 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the entire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So students should be able to model this. Another example, I could have students model 2/3. Well, what should happen is students should take away 1, 2. This is my 2 out of my 1, 2, 3 out of my thirds. This manipulative doesn't only have to be used with the teacher telling students what to model and what to show. This can also be used by giving students a little more autonomy when it comes to working with this tool. So for example, teachers could have students to show them a fraction of their choice limited to the denominator that the teacher instructs them to model. So for example, I could tell students to show me a fraction with a denominator of 8. Well, I'm looking for if students understand which fraction circle to use. They should know that our teacher wants us to model a fraction with a denominator of 8, so we should be using the 8ths fraction circle. Then I want students to show me a fraction with a denominator of 8. So there are literally 7 options that students can show teachers to display their knowledge of this concept. So they can use 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, or 7/8 as any of the fractions to model, because all of those fractions have a denominator of 8. So students can show 3/8 out of this fraction circle, or they can show 6/8 out of the fraction circle. But either way, you are looking for if students are able to display the fraction of their choice using the denominator that you instructed them to use. And these are just a few examples of ways to manipulate with this tool in the classroom when it comes to this specific standard.